Hi, we're going to cover painting in 2D and Blender 3D again. Part 2, we're going to use masks and textures. Want to go back to the setup we talked about with paint, where we have a workspace for the UV image editor. We have our compositor at the bottom. I've disconnected the render layers from the composite, and I'm plugging an image node directly into a viewer, an output viewer. I've changed the default outliner up here into a UV image editor set to viewer node so that it'll activate to this. Okay, what we want to do is I just wanted to cover really quickly about how this works with painting. You'll see that I've roughed this in pretty generically with a couple of different tones, and basically what I've done painting wise, I'm going to set this to paint, is while working with the paint with my brush, I use the letter S to sample, and then I'll use mix to paint it in like that, or I'll use add to lighten an area, which like with there I'll use a larger brush, and I've got it set for pressure on the strength so that way I can lightly touch it and it lightens out. Okay, I kind of get a roundness to it. If I want to draw something darker, I can use this, leaving the color there, I can swap over to multiply, and then you see I can sit there and round something out by making it slightly darker as it goes. And it compounds up, so you got to watch out you don't get too crazy with it. But that's how pretty much I've been working out this whole drawing right here. Now I've got the iterations. You see here I've lightened this area up, added some highlights here, and start suggesting some sort of armor, suggesting some areas here that where my light source would hit. The next step, I got a little bit more detail. I started getting carried away a little bit actually with some of the small detail, but you know, blocking in more form, getting more of a feel for it. And even more, I used the multiply brush to darken his whole underside down quite a bit in comparison to the top, so it would sit underneath and you'd feel like you were actually looking at some depth there. On the fifth iteration, I've got even more detail. I've put the glass here on top. I've drawn inside. If you're using a pen tool, you can use Control Alt and drag outward from the center, and you can zoom in this way. Just Alt with the drag, and you can move your view around. And you see I just barely suggested stuff. It looks like there's a face in there, but it's just because you're seeing it from back there. Okay. Then from there, I've got the first shot of me doing some color work here. And instead of actually painting it in, I use the mask tools. So that's what I want to touch on real quick. Okay, I've already switched back to the last version before I go into color, Soldier Bike 5. We need to use a masking tool, so we're going to switch from paint to mask. And I've already got one marked in for the helmet. Let me go ahead and show you how to add another one. We're gonna make this other piece of armor right here, so we can add it to this. Deselect that. With the mask already here called helmet, I'm gonna go ahead and just continue to add into this one. But if you want, you can turn around and add a whole different mask and use it separately. Alright, now I'm just gonna use it together. Control click to add a point. Control click to continue to add points to the mask. And it kind of gets curvy. It may seem like it's not exactly the way you want it, but we'll be able to pivot these things around by selecting this last one and the first one. Alt C to close it, and by selecting these outside control points, you can grab and move them in to shrink them down and to make them conform basically to the shape that you're trying to get. And the devs did a really good job on this. The masking, it doesn't take near as long as it would if I were to draw with a curve. I've got a Vimeo account where I've actually done some curve work, and it's not near as nice. Okay, I need this to be straight, so we're going to need like a vector. So V to vector, and that gives it a nice sharp edge. Do that on the other side. Grab that, level that out. Okay, and I just want to make sure I'm getting all of that in there. Okay, I need to select this one, but I don't want to select this one. So I just want to select with the right mouse button one of these, hit L for length, and all of them will highlight. I want to feather them out like this one over here, so Alt S and just pull outward a little bit, and you get a feather range that'll make sure your color covers the whole thing. Okay, so now we've got this mask. We want to change this out. I want to use a different color on top of my image. I'm going to make sure I'm loaded the source image here. Shift A to add a color mix node, and it's going to automatically link to the first socket. That's the one we want to use. Second socket is the color we're going to pick. For right now, just to be crazy, I'm going to use this giant purple. Shift A to add input, mask. Plug the mask into the factor input. Turn on anti-alias. Choose the mask that we're using here. For scene size, we need to use the image size here, 2048 by 1024. So we need fixed, and plug those numbers in. Now we want to see our output. We can use this backdrop here. We want to use nodes, and then press C to make it compute. Okay, looks pretty good. Of course, this is not the output you want. You don't want this solid color. We're wanting to preserve our drawing. So there's a trick for that. We can use the mix node, and we can choose something like overlay, and that works pretty well. It's still a little opaque for my taste. So what we can do is press this button to include the alpha of the second input. Tap our image color. Here in the alpha, double click that and change that to 0.5, and it lightens it out. Now I would like to pick a color that's more of my speed. I wasn't really looking for Easter egg, so I will pick maybe this green and darken it. That's not too bad. If I want to make it a little bit more opaque than that, we can always bring the alpha up just a portion a little bit to maybe 0.7, and it will look okay. There's other kinds of color mixing we can choose. Color, which is almost the same. Then there is multiply, which gives a little bit more of the drawing underneath and less of the color. Then there's darken, which don't see very much effect there. Subtract, we get a very, well, maybe it could be useful at some point, but I don't find it here. Soft light, and that looks pretty good. I'm going to go with a soft light. Okay, so now here's a question. How do I get this image out when my render layer is not connected to my composite? How is it supposed to go out? The way I found that it works is you just use this image node, this image editor that is set for viewer node as your render output. Press F3 over this version, and I can use the test render one that I did earlier. Go up with the plus sign, increment to 2, and save it. Now I have the image here. I can go to the paint and paint on it with a mask set texture. So here I'll go back to View, Image. I will open the new colorized texture. There it is with the green. And then I want to go to Paint. Now I want to texture paint. I'm going to use the texture draw mode so that I can make sure I don't mess up my other painting tool. And here, like I said last time, we need to make sure we have our text draw brush example. I'm going to choose an image, and I want to do this as a stencil. So I'm going to find something that's tileable, that's usable. Maybe maybe I use this picture of this metal, and you can already see as it's in Stencil that you can see it here in the viewport. What I want to do is light strength. I've got it set to lighten, and I can move it around with right mouse button. I can rotate it with control right mouse button, and I can scale it up and down with shift right mouse button, so that way I get the coverage I need. If your image is, say, out here, then your texture will stop and you'll have a line. So you want to make sure that you've got enough coverage going on to do this. If you need a smaller version of this and it's tileable, you can change that here to maybe double the scale to make a smaller impression. To see it fully, this is what we're using, but we'll turn it down so we can see our painting underneath. With the brush selected, I'm going to increase my brush to touch, and I've got, like I said, I've got it set to lighten, so it's just going to pick up certain parts of it. I don't want to actually cover the whole drawing. I just want to give enough just for texture. It's not quite doing it. I need a little bit more strength. I think that's too much. Find a happy medium. And it's starting to work. Like I said, it's about getting enough in there, get the suggestion of what we wanted. And then I can also set this the other direction, set it to multiply, and so I can use it to darken it, but also get some of that texture into the darker areas. And it gives a little bit, it's kind of hard to see it in the video, but I mean, if you really want to get really thick, you can do something you can see a little bit better on the screen. But it's mixing. Instead of being something where it's just only the image, it's actually mixing with the drawing we've got there. And that's what I was wanting to show you. Okay? It gives you a couple of tools to mess with, and you can see about making some progress that way. Next tutorial, I'll cover using maybe procedural brushes, and we'll work on the 3D view instead of the UV image editor. Thanks a lot.